Welcome, everyone. Today's hearings are very relevant. We have several committees together today. Health, Ag, and Energy are in the first batch. We have also Ag/Health/Energy in this first agenda. We will be taking up bills relating to the health impact of pesticides. I thought maybe because there are a lot of individuals that were new to this joint, we might go around and introduce ourselves. So my name is Josh Green. I'm chair of the Health Committee from Kona.
Russell Ruderman, chair of the Agriculture Committee from Puna and Ka'u.
Gary Riviere, Vice Chair Ag, Senate District 23, which is the North Shore and windward coast of Oahu.
Laura Thielen, Chair of Waterland Committee and Senate District 25, windward Oahu and a bit of Hawaii.
Hi, I'm Susie Chen Oakland. I represent Nu'uanu Valley, Pa'oa, Kapalama to Kaka'ako.
Glenn Wakai, Vice Chair of the Health Committee. My district is from Kalihi to Aloha Stadium.
Thank you. And again, welcome all. We appreciate everyone's input and wisdom on these issues. Senator Gabbard will be joining us soon. I'm his vice chair, and I'll be sitting in that formal capacity for him for a brief time as well. We're going to start on Senate Bill 793 relating to health impact of pesticides. I did want to mention, I conferred with our Ag chair, each of these measures has significant overlap. Feel free to come and testify to each of the matters. You don't have to repeat yourself. And then, in subsequent, as we go subsequently through the other bills, if there's other things you wanted to add, we don't hold it against you. You can come back up. But we know that most people are going, if history holds true, they're going to say their piece about the measures, what they particularly like or dislike about them, and then we can move on because we're mindful of everyone's time today. So thank you, everyone. Why don't we start with State Department of Agriculture. This is 793.
Good afternoon, Chair Green, Chair Ruderman, committee members. Scott Enright, chairperson for the Hawaii Department of Agriculture. As you'll see in our written testimony, the department has strong reservations about this bill. And to sum it up, this bill does not provide the science-based findings that demonstrate that current laws and pesticide label restrictions are insufficient. And the bill proposed requirements are needed to protect health and the environment. I'll be available for questions.
Thank you, Scott. Appreciate it. Simon Russell from the Farmers Union United.
Sure.
Who's in support? Gary Hoosier, County of Kauai.
Good afternoon, senators, chairs. Pleasure to be here. Senator Chen Oakland, nice to see you. My name is Gary Hoosier. I'm a member of the Kauai County Council. I'm here speaking on my own behalf as an individual council member. And you have my written testimony, and so I'm not going to read it. I'm just going to hit some high points. I want to thank the committee, Senator Green and others, for introducing this measure as number one. We think it's very, very important to our community and to the state as a whole. This measure impacts large companies applying large amounts of restricted use pesticides around the state in an open air next to homes, schools, hospitals, and communities. Many of these pesticides are banned in other countries. Atrazine, which is a product of Syngenta, is banned in Syngenta's own country of Switzerland. Paraquat is used. Paraquat's banned in many countries. There are experimental pesticides. There are plants that are actually pesticides. And there's a lot of stuff going on, and it's really fundamentally about people's health. As a county councilman, I started looking into this with my colleagues on Kauai about 2 years ago after hearing from residents about health problems. And so as a council member, I started looking into this and discovered a number of things that were very troubling. One is that there's a lawsuit going on by 150 residents of Waimea, which are directly impacted by these large amounts of spraying. And they're alleging that the dust and the pesticide drift is impacting their health to a negative degree. I found a sea urchin die-off, which was in the newspapers, of 30 to 50,000 sea urchins directly in the area where these pesticides and the dust and the dirt wash into the ocean. There were several incidences of school students, teachers, faculty who got sick and literally went to the hospital. There's no definitive, I'll be straight up with it, there was no proof that the pesticides being sprayed adjacent to the school were the cause. But after years of fighting with these companies, they voluntarily decided not to spray anymore next to the schools. And since that time, it's my understanding that no children have been sick since that point. And as a council member, just like you, it's my job to try to fix things, to try to look into them. And so the first thing I did as a council member was saying, let's study it. Let's look at what's happening and try to figure this out, if the pesticides really are impacting or they're not. And so I started asking questions and found out that you can't get the information you need to do the study because disclosure is not required. A lot of the information is secret. You can find some of the information and you can't find other information. The companies are unwilling to tell you what's being sprayed, where it's being sprayed, and who it's being sprayed around. And so that's, how do you study something without disclosure? I talk to medical professionals, doctors who express the same frustration. We have patients that are sick. We don't know what chemicals they're being exposed to. The issue of the school, there is no law, and this flabbergasted me when I found out, there is no law to prevent companies from spraying these pesticides on land adjacent to the playgrounds. Okay, so you have a school here and you've got a field here. They can spray right there. There's no law in the state of Hawaii to prevent that. And there's no law that says that the teachers, the principal, and the parents of those students, when they ask these companies, what are you spraying, because I'm concerned about my children, there's no law to require them to disclose. And to me, the disclosure is the most important aspect of this provision. Disclose, disclose, disclose. Because without disclosure, you can't really get the information you need to make good decisions. Doctors can't get it, communities can't get it. And the fact that these companies fight so hard to resist and stop, they're suing the county of Kauai, as everybody knows, because we passed a law requiring them to disclose and saying that you can't spray next to schools, homes, or hospitals. There is no right to know. For what it's worth, when we discussed this on Kauai, we had a majority of the pediatricians in our community testifying support. We had the Hawaii Nurses Association, we had the Hawaii State Teachers Association, we had labor unions, and we had a vast number of people in our community who are here today, many who can afford to spend their money to come here to testify here today, and I'm very proud of my community. And I'll hold my testimony there, and I'm available for questions later if you have questions.
Thank you, Councilman.
Thank you.
Next, we have Lori Kawamoto, ACOG. In support, Ashley Lukens. Hawaii Center for Food Safety.
Yeah, aloha, Chair Green, Chair Ruderman, Vice Chair, members of the committee. Thank you for the opportunity to testify on what I think is a really important step forward for our state, particularly after a series of 3 historic county victories around regulating large-scale agriculture and pesticide use in the state of Hawaii. We've certainly seen an upswell of public interest on this issue, and I think that this bill does a really good job of bringing the right questions to the table. And those questions are, what is the responsibility of the state in regulating the interests of business when they come into direct conflict with public health? When Judge Curran ruled on the Kauai County ordinance that does very similar things to the bill that you're proposing today, he did say that it was the state's kuleana to provide these regulations. And in response to the Department of Agriculture's regulations, reservations on the bill that these kinds of regulations are already in place or sufficient, or there isn't the science that supports increased regulations for pesticide use, particularly around schools, I would say the following. One, the EPA's regulation of pesticides is narrowly focused on active ingredients. We have no idea what kind of regulations would be necessary if we tested both inert and active ingredients. 2, the EPA's definition of drift does not include dust. And we know that here in Hawaii, one of the things that community members alongside of these operations complain about is dust and pesticide-laden dust getting into their homes. Secondarily, 31 other states in the United States already have regulations for pesticide use on or near schools. They've taken up these regulations because they saw it necessary to provide increased protection to their community over and above the protections that were provided by the federal government. We also know that the agricultural industries in those states are able to continue their operations despite protecting children from the potential of pesticide drift. And then to the final question of whether or not the science supports regulating pesticide exposure, particularly around children, the science is really clear. The science tells us that a developing brain needs to be protected from any kind of chemical that could negatively impact its development. Science has definitively linked some of the pesticides that are sprayed regularly here in the state of Hawaii to developmental disorders like autism. And I do think that it's the responsibility of the state to take up that risk and make sure that at least around our schools, we mitigate it. We can't control the movement of all people. We can't control where and when business does things everywhere. But we are already regulating many behaviors around schools. And I think this is a really great first step to tell the community that the state, and not just the counties, takes their concerns seriously, because they've already made so much progress at the county level. And now I think this is the state's opportunity to harmonize our framework with those county victories. So thank you for the opportunity to testify.
Thank you, Ms. Lucas. Next on our testifier list, we have someone I'd like to mention, a woman named Sylvia Pager, a doctor with the American Academy of Pediatrics, testified and submitted testimony in the House for the companion measure, and afterwards had a stroke and passed away in my office, actually, this past week. She had a stroke and then passed at Queens just a few hours later. So we wanted to kind of honor her memory. She testified in support in writing, and we just wanted to acknowledge her. Next, we have Michael Hamilton, American Academy of Pediatrics. Was in support. John Coop.
I have Michael's testimony.
Would you like to come?
Sure.
Share?
Greetings. My name is Lynn Wilson, and I'm here on behalf of the American Academy of Pediatrics Hawaii chapter to honor Dr. Sylvia Pager's longstanding service and advocacy and the testimony she presented last Thursday. She strongly advocated for pesticide disclosure, notification, and buffer zones for restricted use pesticides. I'm not going to read all of her testimony, but I think she deserves the honor of having her words heard here. Aloha kauko. This bill requires that the state protect keiki and kapuna health by requiring disclosure, notification, and buffer zones. It's critical that the state take action to reduce childhood pesticide exposure, because toxic exposure to pesticides during fetal, neonatal, and infant life can disrupt critical developmental processes. The American Academy of Pediatrics recently published a major report entitled Pesticide Exposure in Children that comprehensively reviewed 195 medical studies on the subject. Early life pesticide exposure has been linked to long-term health effects, including cancer, decreased cognitive functions, behavior problems, birth defects, and other adverse birth outcomes, and asthma. Focusing specifically on autism, one study found that expectant mothers residing within 500 meters of sprayed fields, sprayed with insecticides during early pregnancy, had a 6-fold higher risk of bearing children with autism spectrum disorder than mothers not living near such fields. This ASD, or autism spectrum disorder, risk declined with increasing distance from field sites and increased with rising application amounts. Proximity to these fields was also linked to a higher risk of developmental delay. Several of the pesticides at issue in this California study are used on Kauai and likely on other islands as well, with at least 26 schools in Hawaii located within 1 mile of a large agricultural companies. This is grave concern. So Dr. Pager punctuated her testimony by closing with this. The medical evidence is staggering and unnerving. As a doctor, it is my obligation to tend to the health of my community. I take this responsibility with great seriousness. I respectfully urge the committee members here to take their role as policymakers with the same level of seriousness and pass this measure to protect our keiki. Thank you so much.
Thomas Davey, in support. I failed to mention that for this measure we have 400 testifiers. Lynn Robinson Onoderko is in support. Shannon Rudolph in support. Leslie Jones in support. Gail Dornstrike in support. Susan Sims in support. Oida Trahan in support. Irene Dominique in support. Noella Takai in support. John Bach in support. Karen Chun in support. Bernie Stratman in support. Sam Smith in support. Harry Yoshida in support. Maria Walker in support. Jean Bross in support. Brad Edwards in support. Susan Windle in support. Nastasia Hill in support. John Gellert in support. Mary Marvin Porter in support. Cookie Shimizu in support. People should stop me if they are here. Eileen Nita in support. Beverly Montel in support. Shannon Bates in support. Lorna Cummings Poe in support. Nancy Redfeather in support. Linda Emerson and Arian Barr in support. Denise Skirchek in support. Zarko Pekanek in support. Lynn Albrecht in support. Paula Alcosaba in support. And Chara O'Brien in support. Belkis Rutchland in support. William Molman in support. Dana Allen in support. Crystal Todman and Rachel Berger in support. Steve Weiss in support. Ruslan Suvarov in support. Deb Mader in support. Marjorie Irway in support. Ariana Feinberg and John Reagan and Leslie Reagan in support. Jennifer Milholland in support. Rosemary Griffith in support. Deb Mader in support. Celine Janisiewski in support. Autumn Rose in support. Lucia Yu and Rick Morse and Lisa Kerman in support. Bert Faruta and Natalie Axon in support. Morningstar Peak in support. Paula Cohen and Brian Burt in support. Eric Borheis and Chris Delacruz in support. Irene Soloway and R.M. Owens and Louise Simrell in support. Dina Edmondson and Patricia Rubio in support. Faye Pacheco and then Faye Wallace. Thomas Tizard and then Pat and Glenn Nita in support. Robert Negger in support. Jennifer Barretto in support. Patrick Forlotti from Lucy Foundation in support. Mark Gordon and James Long in support. Cheryl Sterling in support. Leslie Patton and Jesse Willett and Lisa Kirbin in support. Martin Ravinsky in support. Is there anyone in the room from that page? Susan Strom, followed by Philip Winkles, followed by Hartson Doak, all in support. Patty Valentine, then Keo Mailani Von Gogh in support. Marilyn McAder in support. Ken Clyde in support. Shelley Mack in support. Judy Rosenstern, then Greg Pontus in support. Carolyn Barrow in support. Carla DeCrona in support. Amy Leroy in support. Stacy Vosberg and Deborah West and Taja Yamamura in support. Karen Baxter, followed by Ken Likotu in support, Malia Damon and James Hedgecock in support, Kenneth Lickout and Susan Oliver, followed by Derek Bickerton, all in support. Teresa Beaugrand, Katie Settlemeyer, both were in support. Claudia Herfert and Melinda McBride in support. Maury Sullivan, Susan Arquette, both in support. Sherry Moore and Katie Romanchuk in support. Daniel Plackenhorn in support. Jen Young in support. Judy Flanders in support. Brett Peters and Jeff Knowles in support. Janice Palma-Glenny in support. Cassandra Fortin-Clays in support. David Cosgrove and Stephanie Austin were each in support. Donna Perkins, followed by George Hoods, both in support. Melinda Buck and Lynn Van Deren in support. Deborah Tooman, Denise Henning, Annalise Malone, all in support. Mateja Frank and Lori Nakamura-Higa, Jonathan Boyne and Jean Hannigan, support. Ernest and Marilis Jepson in support. Thomas Randall and Sierra Knight in support. Toby Ewan in support. Leslie Ackerman in support. Puanani Rogers from Ho'okipa Network, Kauai, in support. Hali Ishiro in support. Mark Sheehan submitting comments. Deanna Asher and Linda McKimson in support. Rebecca Roberts, followed by Mike DeCaza in support. Pomai Stone and then Luan Lee in support. Kareen Chang in support, and Jeff Annie, followed by Ray Pace in support. Cindy Lance, Richard Conrad, Mercedes Minot, and Susan Westmoreland, all in support. Mapu Peters in support. Richard Whale in support. Cassandra Vigil Alep in support. Evan Williams and Pamela Williams in support. Andrew Pendleton in support. Kauai Kaina, forgive me, in support. Anna English in support. Jennifer Powell in support. Dr. Joe Cohn in support. William Harris and Summer Bradbury in support. Samantha Berberich in support. Elizabeth Levings in support. Henry Curtis, Life of the Land, in support. Ann Becker Gomers in support. Noreen Doherty and Sue Purley in support. Ann Klimke in support. Catherine Reynolds in support. John Naylor in support. Michelle Nihipali in support. Jerry DePietro in support. Gary Johnson in support. Marianne Sinden in support. John Gallagher in support. Barack Obama, I'm just kidding. Takes no position on the measures. Carol Kuroda in support. Ray Catania in support. Patricia Blair in support. Kenneth Sakai in support. Sevin Galambos in support. Tim Lyons. I saw Tim.
Thank you, Chairs. I'm Tim Lyons. I'm with the Hawaii Pest Control Association, so I have a different slant on this. However, it's our members that primarily treat structures for pests, and we do note that there's some exclusionary language sort of hidden in the definitions, and we would just respectfully request the committee to establish a separate subsection that makes it clear that that is excluded. There's other language in there that then says all buffer zones, all schools, all structures, all whatever. So it could be easily misinterpreted. And we would just point out, as much as everybody, some people are not so prone to pesticides that even right now, while we are using pesticides, residents in Hawaii are losing $100 million a year to termite damages, and there's $241 million a year to schools in termite damages. So we would hope that you would entertain that. Thank you.
Thank you, Tim. Thank you very much, Tim. We move next to Ruth Lewis in support. Tom Pasquale in support. Sydney Zari, in support. Lynn Austin, in support. Ellie Cochran, in support. Deanna Barth, in support. Mara Peisel, in support. Amy Wood, W-U-L-D, in support. Jill Seibert, in support. Richard Mindar and Lewis Thompson, followed by Sharon Cushman, in support. Sophia Bicoy, in support. Carol Remington, in support. Dennis Klimke, in support. Excuse me. Deborah Erickson, in support. William Coate, in support. And Joel McDonald, in support. Vince Kanai Dodge, in support. Jay Boast, in support. Julian Miller and Jan Barush, in support. Timory McDonald, in support. Michael Vaughn, in support. Ryan Ramjet, in support. Councilwoman Karen Ea from Big Island, in support. David Luborski, in support. Virginia Bennett, in support. Laura Kahulamu, in support. Joanne Freed, in support. Barbara Borgnino, in support. Jonathan Boyne, in support. Katrama Brooks, in support. And Jean Butler, in support. Leslie Coulter, followed by Kathleen Notestone, both were in support. Sandra Bunnell, in support. Leanne Fox, in support. Carly Birch, in support, followed by Maria Itzov, in support. Mitsuko Hayakawa, in support, and then Maureen Langberg, in support. Hoku Kabebe, in support, followed by Reuben Chong and Susan Garment, and Lori Field from Planned Parenthood, in support. Elif Beal, in support. Oh, thank you.
Aloha chairs, vice chairs, and members. My name is Elif Beal. This is my first time ever testifying at the state level.
Thank you.
I'm honored. Thank you for the opportunity to testify. I'm here to express my strong support for SB 793 and for buffer zones and disclosure of pesticides. I'm a resident of Kauai, and on Kauai, last year, 2 years ago, we worked hard to pass a similar type of bill with buffer zones of pesticides. You know, thousands of people marched, and 3 out of the 4 counties have worked to create protections for their communities, such as in this bill. And at every turn, we've been told the county is not the place to do it. It's the state's role. So now we're here, and even during testimony on Bill 2491 on Kauai, representatives of the chemical companies and the research operations testified that they were in support of the intent of the bill, but that it was the state's role to legislate and not the counties. So I'm so excited that we're here and that this issue is being heard, and I know that a lot of other people are going to testify to the scientific evidence and the public health concerns surrounding this, but I just really wanted to express just a personal passion and strong desire to see this happen for my community. Thank you.
Thank you for traveling today. Samantha Sherline, in support. Stanley Garment, in support. Mari Ono, in support. Dorothy Binder, in support. Manu Manu, support. Jean Adair Leland, in support. Kelly Wassel, in support. Tina Wildberger, in support. Barb Travis, in support. And Terry Travis, in support. Uriel Blair, in support. Maria Lanker, in support. Bella Doty, in support. Stephanie Haddad, in support. Jade Chang, in support. Michelle Sylvester, in opposition. Bobby Lempert, in support. Ian York, in support. Teddy Ego, in support. Doug Vincent, in opposition. Jay Duquette, in support. Mr. Shepard, in support. Renee Kester, in opposition. Harvest Edmonds, in support. Makana Kaholelu, in support. William Brayman, in support. And Joe Amsterdam, followed by Brad Parsons, in support. Frederick Von Essen, in support. Dennis Yamaguchi, in opposition. Shelley Pollock, in support. David Thompson, in support. And Claudia Rice, in support. Followed by Mona Weigand, in support. And Patricia Phillips, in support. Bennett Mizaluka, Hawaii Crop Improvement Association, in opposition.
Yeah. If that's okay, I should present that testimony for ECIA. Of course. Okay. She's right here. She didn't care.
She doesn't care about you, or doesn't care about...
Good idea. Good idea.
I wouldn't refer to him. You're better looking.
Thank you. That was a big compliment.
What?
It echoes. Yes, we know.
All right.
We're friends. That's good.
Aloha chairs and vice chairs and committee members. My name is Kirby Kester, president of the Hawaii Crop Improvement Association, and we respectfully oppose this bill. And we disagree with the idea that there's widespread problems associated with pesticide applications in the state and the need for these extensive and unprecedented measures. The proposed legislation assigns arbitrary restrictions and conditions that go far beyond science-based regulations, which we can which we stand behind. The U.S. EPA currently evaluates and registers pesticides to ensure that they will not harm people, non-target species, or the environment. And after thorough risk assessments, the EPA determines if a pesticide can be sold and used. It dictates where it can be used, the amount, frequency, timing of its use, and how it will be stored or discarded. The EPA determines the conditions under which a pesticide can be used based on ongoing research of any possible health or environmental effects. So the EPA does this. They're charged with this. These measures undermine their role and will potentially harm Hawaii's farmers without providing increased safety. Before any additional state pesticide restrictions are imposed, they should be determined to be justifiable and necessary. The Hawaii Department of Ag has jurisdiction over this and can protect the public, and if it determines that further regulations are warranted. And there's there's a lot of laws in 149 already. I mean, people forget that I've held a sprayer license for about 10 years. I don't have one currently, but it's a $5,000 fine, private fine, if you misapply a pesticide, which we are regulated and inspected. It's up to $25,000 in civil penalties. It's not an unregulated event that agriculture does. I just want to make that clear. We respectfully request that these bills be held rather than create new and arbitrary laws that will make it more difficult for farmers to stay in business in Hawaii. We support the concepts and other pesticide-related bills introduced this session, such as Senate Bill 734, that would give the HDOA and the University of Hawaii increased funding and capacity to more effectively perform their roles, including educating growers and others to ensure proper pesticide use, assistance in implementation of pesticide drift reduction strategies, and appropriate enforcement capability. We believe that a strong state pesticide regulatory program is essential to assuring the public that pesticide products are used. Thanks for this opportunity to submit testimony.
Thank you. We'll probably have questions at the end.
Okay.
Makani Hunting, Farming and Fishing Association.
Hello, guys. My name is Makani Christensen. Thank you for the opportunity today, and I oppose this measure. I'm here because I'm a fisherman, and we created an association because a lot of the same issues that we're facing all the way across the board, from hunting, fishing, and farming, are the same. We, the people that feed Hawaii, are actually being pushed out of Hawaii, being pushed out of our own backyards. And this bill here, for small farmers, has detrimental effect for actually growing local grown. And as a public citizen and as a person that lives here, 20% of our crops, or 20-30% of our crops are grown here. We're failing as a state. But what this does is buffer zone. Let's say a university or a school, so all of a sudden the development started to come out. These farms have been there for 30, 40 years. All of a sudden it has a chance to lose everything that they worked for. Are we going to allow that? We maybe need to rethink the law, maybe write it a little bit different, but we can't allow small business to fail, especially our local farmers. Otherwise, sustainability is just a word that we're really not serious about. So I appreciate your opportunity today to speak, and I oppose this measure. Thank you.
Thank you for coming forward. Gordana Leonard was in support. Carolyn Pate, in support. Saram, in support. Fabian Christie, in support. Joette Burke, in support. Brian Funai, in opposition. Shannon Papalimu, in support. And Waioni Dickinson, in support. Donnie Gray, followed by Sheila Smalley, were both in support, and Astrid Watanabe, in support. Shab Kalasa, in support. Angel Whitlack, in support, followed by Dave Kaiser, in support. Nate Hayward, from the Hawaii Farmers Union, in support. Nalani Sato, in support, followed by Julie Carter, in support. Tony Sylvester, in opposition. Marilyn Powers, support. Camille Chong and Paul Littleton, in support, followed by Warren Watanabe, Maui County Farm Bureau, in opposition. Christine Beltran, in support. Brian McCoat, in support. And then Debbie Holloman, in support. Jane Spur, followed by Josette Jackson, followed by Eve Powers, in support. Renee Gangsk, in support, and Sandra Lane, in support. Then Kala Nakasone, in support. And Kaulana Poe, in support. Ra'ana Jasmine, in support. Catherine Casoro, in support. Then Linda Menzies, in support. Dina Mazhirsky, in support, followed by Christopher Correa, in support. Then Kathy Shimada and Jean Hodges and Todd Bloom, in support. Victoria Yoakum was in support, and Carol Sappington, also in support. We had John Gordines in opposition. Tia Person and Ann Evans were in support, and Elizabeth O'Connor in support. Jody Mahan in support. Susan Vickery in support. Moana Waiteka was in support, and Makota Ian was in support. Christine Veazey was in support, and Teresa Tico was in support. Alan Gottlieb, Hawaii Cattlemen's Council, opposition. John Fitzpatrick, in support, and Carol Culver, in support, followed by Alan Cremott, in support. Then Nikki Moss, Janava Baldassare, in support. Alicia Malufiti. Alicia.
Aloha, chairs, members. Good to see you. Alicia Malufiti, actually testifying on behalf of Crop Life America. And we manufacture register the pesticide products that are used for agriculture. Since we've been talking a lot about the schools, the one correction I would offer up is the statement about the 33 states using this kind of statute. I actually found one. It's really not this kind of language. It's not buffer zone. In fact, none of them have anything to do with ag. What it is, it's called integrated pest management. And Centers for Disease Control actually has outlined a wonderful policy for schools to adopt. And in fact, New Jersey, the New Jersey School Integrated Pest Management Act of 2002, and it's wonderful because integrated pest management is what farmers use every single day. So what I was thinking, maybe the best first step is to ask the schools, it could be individually and it could be as the department-wide, ask them to put into place integrated pest management strategies as a way to really keep the keiki safe. Because I think you've heard from some of the farmers already, it's not really been the farmers. Here on Oahu, within the last 18 months, I live in Ewa Beach. We had an incident in Ewa Beach, 3 schools. One in Hawaii Kai, one in Waipahu. Guess what? No farms around there. It was the neighbors. Okay? It was folks in the area misusing pesticides. So, I mean, here's 3 on Oahu that we just experienced where the kids had to be evacuated, but yet here's language really targeting farmers again with buffer zones. I guess the idea is let's start at the school first and get them to start implementing policies and practices that will keep the keiki safe. And let's see if that works first, since the most recent incidents obviously were a problem. We do like Senate Bill 734. It's exactly what everyone's been complaining about. Department of Ag, they lose all their inspectors. We went through the RIF, the reduction in force. Senate Bill 734 would give them the tools and resources to do their job. It would give them the inspectors. It would do the educational piece that we all need.
Stick to this bill, please.
Yeah, and that's why the education piece. And I think that's why the testimonies and what these other school districts and what the Centers for Disease Control puts out, education is the #1 issue. Just as an example, I just went through a whole can of flea treatment for the animals we take care of. One of our volunteers used it inappropriately, and they put not only the animals at risk, but themselves and the other volunteers at risk. And I had to go back to them and have them read the label specifically, and that's the #1 problem with most of us as homeowners. People don't read the labels when applying pesticides, and it's there for a purpose. It's to reduce risk. We've got little fire ant problems. We've got beetle problems. We have all these pest problems, and pesticides serve an important purpose if used appropriately, and the regulatory process is intended to reduce risk. I would just suggest that maybe this idea of integrated pest management be revisited as a school-based policy first, and let's see if the schools continue to be safe after that. And we can address the issues with the farmers by providing the tools and resources to the Department of Ag. Thanks.
Thank you. QB Maddox was in support, as was Michael Grosny was in support. Lori Farrell, Hawaii Farm and Ranchers United.
Aloha, Chair. My name is Lori Farrell. I'm the project director for Hawaii Farmers and Ranchers United on Hawaii Island. We grow 93% of all ag revenue on Hawaii Island on 683,000 acres of land, $194 million of economic revenue, almost 3,000 farmers. Farmers are land stewards, and we understand firsthand the need for crop protection methods and pesticides. We live in our communities, and our children go to local schools. Homeowners use 10 times the amount of pesticides than agriculture does. None of the incidents in recent years involved agriculture, yet we're being targeted. Activist groups have targeted farmers with anti-farming legislation. Perception is not the method to set public policy. No facts equal no farmers equals no food. We oppose Senate Bill 793 and the other bills. Farmers and agriculture is not the enemy. We feed and we help sustain Hawaii. Mahalo.
Thank you for coming. Heather Salmon was in support. Wade Holmes in support. And Shanti Brown in support. Samantha Bardwell, followed by Elise Travis, followed by Miles Mulcahy in support. Then Irvin Bush and Sally Waite in support. Dore Shin in support. And Victoria Cannon in support. Chelsea Heller and then Denise Woods in support. Vicky Vieira in support. Robert Patrici in support. Jessica Villafranco was in support. Joni Camilla, opposition. Ramit Islam in support. Alex Franco in opposition. Carly Williams in support. Yes.
I'm a little nervous. I haven't done this in a minute, but my name is Carly Williams. Aloha, mahalo for your consideration of my testimony here today. I hear everyone talking about this is an anti-farming bill. I just wanted to point out that within the past month, I've volunteered on 3 different farms, all of which don't use pesticides. So I just wanted to throw that out there. But my testimony here today says, I'm just testifying mostly as a resident, as I do live on the North Shore. And as I'm sure a lot of us know, this is where a lot of the chemicals are being sprayed and stuff. And as far as our knowledge goes, these restricted use pesticides include 2,4-D and dicamba and glyphosate. And the thing is that these chemicals are being banned kind of around the world, or restricted or strictly regulated around the world. And every day I feel like I'm seeing new evidence coming out about how these chemicals are now being linked to behavioral issues and digestive issues and endocrine issues, and the list just keeps going on and on. And so, as American citizens, I feel it is our right to know exactly what is being sprayed, how much of it, and where. It is our right to hold our local governments accountable to be aware of this information and make decisions regarding the safety of the land and people accordingly. It is our right to live freely from the pesticide drift, which I've seen it on many videos already, that's carried by water and wind. And that's where the buffer zones come in handy, because I do feel like we need to protect our residential and school areas, and also our organic farms who are within the area too. So please pass Bill SB793 and make the Pono decision to serve and protect the people from these chemical companies and not small farm companies. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Williams. Alan Takamoto.
Good afternoon, chairs. My name is Alan Takimoto. I'm here on behalf of Monsanto Hawaii. Safety for all is Monsanto's #1 priority. All of Monsanto's employees who work with pesticides receive extensive training. We strive daily to ensure a safe working environment for our employees and guests. We are very aware of our surroundings and take every measure to ensure our neighbors are not impacted by our operations. Monsanto is also committed to being a responsible steward of the land. We utilize soil and water conservation practices in all of our farm operations. We diligently comply with federal and state laws that govern responsible pesticide use, and in many cases have taken additional stewardship measures. Many farmers, including Monsanto, use an integrated pest management program that use all aspects of pest and disease control that don't necessarily require the use of pesticides, but also incorporates other techniques and natural occurrences. Monsanto and its employees and their families are very attentive to the health and well-being of the communities where we work and live. Our employees and their families also attend the nearby schools, child care facilities, hospitals, and community centers from which everyone benefits. Basically, we are people too. We care about the environment. We don't think that this bill is the avenue by which we believe that we can work with. There are existing rules and regulations and requirements that we take very seriously when it comes to pesticide use. For these reasons, we respectfully oppose these measures on Senate Bill 793, 1037, and 797. Thank you.
Thank you, Alan. Michelle McKay was in support. Adolph Helm was in opposition. Elizabeth Kemp in support. Teresa Amato in support. Paul Oshiro in opposition. Brittany Bowers.
Paul's here.
Thank you, Paul.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair, members. Paul Oshiro, representing Hawaiian Commercial and Sugar Company, testifying very respectfully in opposition. By mandating the imposition of pesticide buffer zones, this bill may prevent the continued use of lands that are presently in active agricultural production, in that these buffer zones will only be applicable to certain agricultural entities. We note that this bill may allow other non-agricultural entities and other persons who use the same restricted use pesticides and general use pesticides to be exempt from the provisions of this bill. In addition, Chair and members, should new sensitive area facilities, schools, hospitals, and the list of things that are listed in that definition, should new facilities be situated on lands adjacent to an affected commercial farm in the future, new buffer zones may be established. And the uncertainty of these future buffer zones being established as a result of actions on neighboring lands is likely to be problematic for farm and agricultural business planning. In summary, we believe that the federal and state entities that presently oversee pesticide regulation and use, possess the technical knowledge, the expertise to implement additional pesticide restrictions and regulations when warranted and necessary to further protect employees, the general public, and our environment. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. Brittany Bowers was in support. Chris Manfredi. Hawaii Farm Bureau.
Afternoon, chairs, vice chair, members of the committee. Chris Manfredi, representing Hawaii Farm Bureau. I'm a citizen of Ka'u, so it's nice to be here with each of you.
Yes.
Wish it was under better circumstances. We have to respectfully oppose this measure, this group of measures. I'd like to speak generally to the measures and then specifically on the one on the agenda now. That was a lot of testifiers. What'd you say, 400?
Yes, we had, I can give you the total number that we projected, but that was before late testimony.
Does that include the president or no?
He's coming soon. We have 384 in our first count, and there was 362 in support and 22 in opposition, including you.
Thanks. As I said, I'm speaking on behalf of Hawaii Farm Bureau, and I have a number. It's 1,982 member families who couldn't be here today, and I've been asked to represent them. We oppose this measure. Restricted use pesticides are intensely researched, very effective, and efficient. Users are licensed and trained. This training, existing regulations, and this efficiency leads to the use of fewer pesticides, which in turn helps the environment. Farmers are following the law. There are ample laws and regulations in this area through the EPA and Department of Agriculture. Violators are currently liable for significant fines, civil penalties, and can be found negligent in a court of law, and in some instances face jail time. Moreover, agriculture is a minority user of restricted use pesticides. Our information shows that agriculture only uses 13% of restricted use pesticides. We're waiting for the figures for the rest of the state. State and county governments and the pest control industry are the majority users of restricted use pesticides. Studies have shown that pesticide residues are more prevalent in urban centers rather than on farms. We always talk about sustainability, food security. Sustainability is economic, social, and environmental. These measures would force farmers out of business, especially the most vulnerable of them. At the same time, we're claiming we're working toward food security and sustainability, and I think those two are at odds with each other. Hawaii Farm Bureau also supports SB793, which would give more tools to the Department of Agriculture in terms of human and financial resources to regulate in this area. And that's something that we welcome. Furthermore, strengthening biosecurity funding reduces introduction of pests in the first place, including weeds and disease. So we welcome the opportunity to strengthen biosecurity measures to stop the bugs from getting here in the first place. We also support buy local measures, which also cuts down on invasives. Because a lot of the invasives that come in on imported food and plants.
Chris, please restrict your testimony to this measure.
Certainly. But buying local is a function of competitive price. We like to address all the factors that place Hawaii's farmers and ranchers at a competitive disadvantage to our mainland counterparts. In other words, let's take a holistic approach to this. Those are my general comments on this group of bills. Specifically to this measure, and I don't know if this is intentional, but there's a definition of a watershed and then buffer zones as it relates to a watershed. Well, watershed is everywhere. So even a buffer zone that is 1 inch would eliminate the use of these products everywhere. This building is in a watershed. So we asked the committee to look at that language. But ideally, we'd like to see this bill held. Thank you for the opportunity to present our comments. Thank you.
Thank you. Angie Troxel was in support. Mary Miller in support. Joe Ritter was in support. Liddy Morgan Bernal in support. And Cindy Goldstein from DuPont was in opposition. Tanja Miller and Pat Geegan in support, followed by Deborah Zeisman from Good Beginnings Alliance in support. Mark Phillipson from Syngenta in opposition. Jasmine Hong in support, followed by Malia Nobriga Oliveira. That was the Association of Hawaii Civics Clubs in strong support. Iris Iwami in opposition. Sarah Date in support. Kaliko Amona in support. And Elif Beal presenting comments. We're going to take a pause on Senate Bill 793 and then come to our late testifiers. We have another measure on our 340. She's gone?
She's not here.
She's passed away?
No, she's just.
Still among us. She's just not through.
Thank goodness. Okay, strike that. We keep going. Senate Bill 793 will proceed. These are the late testifiers, and as we come down the home stretch, for a few hundred more testifiers, then if I've missed anybody, give them the opportunity, of course, to testify. Juanita Brown Kawamoto from the Environmental Caucus of the Democratic Party in support. Last time I saw you, Malama was yelling at us both.
It wasn't that fun.
Yes.
She's not here to yell today, yes? But aloha to Malama.
Yes. She's dear to me in many ways, too. I'm just teasing.
Aloha chairs, aloha esteemed members. As chair of the Environmental Caucus of the Democratic Party, we strongly support Senate Bill 793. My name is Juanita Brown Kawamoto. Respectfully, science and research is relevant based on individual or particular conditions. Impacts from these pesticide processes require constant testing, and the testing of these pesticides only account for particular situations. The testing is never truly over, as we find over 1.5 million people and wildlife continuously falling ill in their own backyards. Let's not forget, the intent of this bill is focused on large commercial users who choose to withhold from our people their agricultural pesticide practices. The Kekeʻoka'aina deserve the civil right to know. Maoli Hawaiians practice ahupua'a, traditional Hawaiian farming, feeding 1 million people without modern pesticide use, and continue to practice today ahupua'a to feed and protect the hui kulana kauhale, or our village. Small family farms who practice aloha share the concerns of their communities and let their people know what's going on. Let their neighbors know what is happening. The need to hold accountable commercial use of pesticides and its impacts on Hawaiʻi is a priority. The public safety and health and welfare of our keiki and our kupuna should be a priority. The process set forth by this good legislation provides all citizens of the state of Hawaii the knowledge. People are the priority. Mahalo for the opportunity to testify.
Thank you. Thank you for being with us, Juanita. Terry Powell, in support. Catherine Paul, in support. And Keith Ranney, in support. Chamber of Commerce, in opposition. Miley Ben-Dor, in support. Catherine Velasquez, in support. E. Yadao, in support. There was additional testimony from the Association of Hawaii Civic Clubs, in support. And Natalie McKinney, in support. Elaine Nakayama, in opposition. Matthew Ross, in opposition. Thank you. Please come up.
Well, Senator Green, I'm not a farmer. I'm a commercial fisherman. I was compelled to testify today. I was originally here on another measure related to my profession. However, I have at least 3 friends who either own or work on small farms that would be affected by this. What concerns me is that I see it becoming harder and harder for producers in Hawaii, including farmers, to survive. And many of these measures, they may seem like good ideas on paper, but if it's the kind of thing where large corporations could be able to get away with them, but smaller businesses can't. And I see that in my field as well as farming. Like the buffer zones, that's fine if you have very large fields, but small farms, that could wipe out the whole thing. Sorry, I don't know what to say.
No, you're doing fine.
But one of the things I see is I understand where the supporters of this bill are coming from. I know their heart is in the right place, but I just hope that in the future there'll be opportunities to farm fish, just produce our own food in Hawaii, just for our children. It's sad to see when people who grew up here have to move away to Vegas or California just because there's no opportunities left. We need to diversify our economy for everybody. That's where I'm coming from. So please look out for small farmers and don't pass it small.
Thank you. For clarification, because I think Mr. Ross brought up some good points, that's why we have thresholds. And they would be, modest so it wouldn't affect small farms. That was the purpose. But I do appreciate you bringing that up. Next, Patrice Gutermont in support, followed by Clay Posner in support, and then Freddie Von Essen and Lisa Donovan in support. Yelena Kogan was in support. Robin Hammerquist in opposition. Rory Marsh in support, followed by Shayla Moon in opposition. John McHugh provided comments, then Catherine Elias was in support. Howie Simon provided supportive comments, and then Stuart Coleman from the Surfrider Foundation was in support. Karen Kriegmeyer was in support, and Gordine Kakalia was in support. Patricia Blair was in support, and Dean Sensui was in opposition. We had Cheryl Royce, followed by Michaela Freitas, followed by Mark Sheehan, all in support, and then Catherine Betts, Hawaii State Commission on the Status of Women, in support. Nina Cherry was in support, and Paul Kumara Jr. in support. Patrick Haley Simmons was in support, and Tara Grace in support. Rosemarie Toussaint in support. Jean-Luc Bazzoli was in support. Called Sally Wade earlier in support. David Mullenix in support, and Lucia Maya in support. Amy Perusa in support, followed by Dave Kaiser in support. Then Mary Lax and Serena Adolfo in support. Then Marcy Colton Criley in support, and Tanya Emerald in support. Kelly Kim, Kathy Mach, and Arian Barr in support. Tulsi Greenlee in support. Shelley McGregor, then Michelle Matson, then Sally Jane Bodnar were all in support. Lauren Rego was in support, and Melissa Verbena in support. A woman named Tulsi was also in support. And Johnny Belisle in support. And Colin Dana in support. James Kulalolio in support. And Cade Watanabe from Unite Here Local 5 in support. Ruth Lewis was in support, and David Contreras was in support. Sarah Luth was in support, as was Lorraine Zane, and then Karen Enovius in support. Loya Widmer and Albert Sekirja was in support. Then Janan Platt and Carol Hart were in support, and Allison Yim, followed by Joanna Wheeler, Kathleen Gagnon, followed by Bonnie Rasmussen in support. Dylan Hooser.
Well, hi everybody. Thank you for hearing this today. Appreciate for having you guys have us here. I'm here in support of 793 today, and I don't even know where to start after hearing all these testimony back and forth. We just want help. Buffer zones and disclosure shouldn't be so hard. We just want to protect our schools. I hear we're highly regulated, I've heard we have one inspector in our county. I've heard they spray over 200 days out of the year. That's just one company. How highly regulated is that? Come on now. You make a mistake on one day, you're going to be regulated? You got one guy. That's one company who's spraying over 200 days out of the year. The only reason why we know that is because they're in a lawsuit. The rest we don't know. That's why we need disclosure. We need to know what's going on in our community. We need to know. It's a basic right. You know, somebody's spraying next door to your house 200 days out of the year. You don't want to know? I do, and that's why we're here. And we're going to keep coming back. So please help us. Thank you, guys.
Thank you, Dylan. Leslie Wingate was in support. Juanina Kawamoto was in support, and Kala Nakasone was in support, followed by Janet Pappas, and then Deb Trelinsky was in support. Barbara Butler, and then Angela Flynn, followed by Marla Bender, all in support. Leona Thompson was in support, and Cynthia Montgomery. Please, come on.
Appreciate you guys' time. My name is Leona Thompson, here from Kauai County. Again, always a pleasure coming to the Capitol. I had a bunch of stuff written out on my phone that I was going to read out, but after hearing again the testimony from today, it clearly states in 793 and 149A-C, it says it in dash A and B as well, that it should only be mandatory for commercial ag that annually uses excess of X pounds and X gallons of RUP. So this is not going to affect our local fishermen or our small local farmers, and it saddens me that these huge multi-billion-dollar chemical companies have convoluted our small farmers to think that it will affect them. And I come from a community that's very close. They are affected. These families have come to members, leaders in our community. This is the only way. Our leaders have literally told us we have to come to the state, because every time we come to the county, they send us into litigation. Every county. You all know it. I'm going to keep it very brief, and it's just, please help us. This is, again, it's disclosure. We cannot make correlations. Doctors cannot diagnose if they don't know what to look for. It's very basic. Again, missing work and school yet again, but it's okay. I have faith in this process, in this committee, and I really, truly appreciate all of your time and listening to everyone. So thank you.
Thank you very much. Kathleen Horgan was in support.
Aloha. I'm actually Tiana Laranio, but I'm reading for Kathleen Horgan as she cannot be here. Also flying over here from Kauai County. Kathleen lives in the affected areas and has a child as well. She says she's in full support of SB793, and that is being applied near schools in sensitive areas. Waimea Canyon Middle School has had several incidences in recent years where evacuation of the schools were required due to pesticide poisoning, and other schools have also had evacuations incidents. Doctors and nurses had no idea what the teachers and children had been exposed to, and follow-up testing was not performed until years after exposure. Still yet, they found restricted use pesticides used by the chemical companies on the school campus where the children eat, learn, and play, as well as in their drinking waters. At least 26 schools in Hawaii are located within a mile of large agriculture companies that spray restricted use pesticides. Hospitals are also in sensitive areas on Kauai and Waimea and in Lihue. Kathleen lives in Kekaha on Palila Loop behind Kekaha Road. She sent you a map on looking on where she is located, within about 500 feet of where the ADC leases to these chemical companies. My son, she also sent you a picture of him. Preschool is within a half mile of the Mana fields leased by ADC. He suffers from asthma that began after he started school there. When we lived on East Kauai, it would be difficult when he lived on the east side of the Kauai. It would be difficult to determine the cause of the asthma with any certainty. However, it is certain that he and others like him will be especially sensitive and susceptible to pesticide exposure from nearby sources. Children in general are naturally more sensitive to chemical exposure. In both locations, I cannot find out what chemical will be sprayed, where or when, either in advance or after the fact. The Good Neighbor voluntary program that the Department of Agriculture started does not provide this kind of information. It does not even provide information about general use pesticides that likely make up over 50% of what is used by the large companies. It does not provide protection for those that are truly their neighbors. The chemical industry will tell you their product is safe and have been tested extensively. They have not been tested on our ohana. The labels say they should not be used near schools and children and sensitive areas. If the chemical industry is concerned about more than the corporate bottom line, then they will not fight this modest measure to protect our health. I ask you to look deep within today and do what is best for our ohana, our future, and pass SB793. This is a very modest pesticide reporting bill without delay. Respectfully, Kathleen Horgan, Kekaha, Hawaii.
Thank you. Thank you. Very well spoken. That brings me to the end of the list that I had for late testimony and earlier testimony. Who else do I have? Can people just show of hands of individuals? Okay. Why don't people just come up by row if they'd like to testify in person or just stand on their testimony in support. It's up to you, or opposition. Up to you as well. But please come up. Just state your name and then so we can enter into the record.
Sure. Aloha, my name is Chelsea Matsushima Contreras. Thank you, Chair, Vice Chairs, and members of the committee for allowing me to be present here. It's also my first time on a state level, conducting a testimony, so mahalo nui. I'm also from the county of Kauai. I am a mother of two. Any parent here would know that their children is their priority, like Auntie was saying earlier, that our kupuna and our children are priority. And as an educator and as a mother, I'm in fear of where I need to take my kids to school because I'm not too sure where in Kauai we have these fields, and without the disclosure of whether or not, they're surrounded by these fields, I don't know if I can trust where my kid go to school. My 3-year-old, special to me, just got diagnosed with autism. All this talk, with autism, I want to know how I can service my child. He needs extra care. I've been unemployed for a year because I put that on side to take care of my child. So with that being said, I'll keep it real short because I really had a full speech to read, but by hearing what I've been hearing from both sides, I'm with Dylan and Leona. I just want help. I'm a helpless parent here. I'm a human being. I have the right to know. So do my kids, and so do my fellow, my community, period. I am a community advocate for health and wellness in Anahola, and I'm in love with my kids, and I would just like for you to feel that emotion that we just need your help. We are not here to affect small farmers. I have a garden. My friends, I eat out of my friends' gardens. Like, we are going to be greatly affected if these companies are able to come past Wailua River, which they will soon, if we don't know where they are. And my keiki, they reside in Kapa'a and Anahola. I do not want to see any of these people on that side of my island. And I speak on behalf of my family who live in Kekaha and Waimea in Hanapepe. My cousin was greatly affected in that Waimea Canyon school. She's not written a testimony quite yet, but she will, because that's how powerful it is. And for all the other voices who cannot be spoken, I'd be more than happy to be seen here more than once this month or next month, because I will put the funds down if that's what it means to come here and speak on behalf of everybody on Kauai. Mahalo.
Thank you, Chelsea. Who would like to be next? Please come up.
Aloha, Senators. Thank you for hearing this important piece of legislation. My name is May Fuimano. I'm a family nurse practitioner. I have 15 years of experience in acute care. I have a master's degree in science and nursing. And I've spent the past 3 years coming and testifying on any bill aimed at regulating the seed industry here in Hawaii. I'm not anti-business, anti-agriculture, or against jobs. I'm here because oftentimes in medicine, we know the value of prevention. Immunizations, breast cancer screening, pap smears, well child checks are all important services we provide to promote and protect health. The old adage, an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure, is so true. Why is this bill a bill about prevention and health? I did a quick PubMed search and found 23,131 journal articles about pesticide exposure. Sentinel had similar results. The data is out there to support the fact that pesticide exposure has negative effect on human health, period. So much of the data has been synthesized that the American Pediatric and ACOG, American College of Gynecology, have official policy statement. And trust me, getting consensus from a bunch of physicians is very similar to getting consensus from a bunch of politicians.
Welcome to my world.
Yeah, several committee meetings. So official policy is actually, it's a really big deal when it happens. It changes the way that we practice medicine. When you listen to testimony after testimony of people who live next to these fields, reporting bloody noses, seizures, birth defects, neurological, cognitive disorders, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, please believe them when they say it's related to the high amounts of pesticides being used by the seed companies. Because in all honesty, it most likely is. The seed companies know just as well as I do that chronic exposure is hard to link to disease. However, more and more longitudinal studies are coming out, and we can no longer ignore the correlations, and we can actually prove direct causation now. With the proposed buffer zones and disclosure, local researchers will actually be able to do the studies. And if what the seed companies are saying is true, and we have nothing to fear, then they should welcome this type of legislation with open arms because they will be vindicated. However, I feel like they must know something I don't. Otherwise, they wouldn't have spent millions of dollars in Maui to oppose the GMO ban, and they wouldn't be engaged in lawsuits with all of our counties. It is your responsibility as lawmakers to make decisions that protect life and health, and you have the opportunity now to provide sensible, really conservative legislation to do just that. I just humbly ask that you pass this through today and be part of creating a legacy of health for our beloved island home. Thank you.
Yes. Okay. Thank you very, very much. Next other people put their hands up, please, if they'd like to testify.
Aloha, Senator Josh Green and Vice Chair and all the members of the committee. My name is Tiana Lorenzo. I submitted a late testimony, but I just wanted to say on record that I strongly support SB793, and I thank you all for allowing it to come to hearing. Just like my fellow Kauai folks that flew over here, we are going to continue to come because we are experiencing, I am talking to our communities, we are hearing the stories, we are seeing the effects, and we just want answers and help. And again, like we said, it took 2 years to push forward for that ordinance that we just passed, and now we're being held up in litigations for it. So meanwhile, our community is still sick, our children are still sick, so we need we petition the help of the state to give us some strength. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Tiana.
Okay. I didn't submit. I was going to submit in person to my testimony. My name is Lauren Pang. I'm a physician. I am not supposed to tell you what I do for my day job, but before I took this job, I was the World Health Organization advisor for 25 plus years, directing research. Currently, I review research for the U.S. Congress on products. I am a professor of medicine at the University of Brasilia. Last year, I was a visiting professor. And I have about 6 dozen publications in peer-reviewed medical journals. More importantly, I was out there in Kauai when Kauai first had their problem, twice, to look at their children, another time to write the report, and I am the medical advisor for the class action lawsuit on Kauai. I'm from Maui. Being the medical advisor, I'm privy to what people use, the chemical companies use and don't use. I'll just cut this real short, right to the chase here. I think I can contribute quite a lot of scientific arguments to justify what you do. I support. Maybe you can modify it a little bit. First of all, these chemicals that are used, a lot of them are cyto. Cyto means to kill. Pesticide, kill. Kill nematodes, kill fungus, kill whatever. Kill. They're pharmacologically active. Now, a lot of the other chemicals are enhancing the killing. They allow penetration, persistence, etc. So these things are not, as I've been criticized, beef stew. Beef stew is a combination of gajillion chemicals, but how many chemicals of beef stew are cidal? So these things, what I have to say, particularly addresses pharmacologically active cytochemicals, these pesticides. What's the problem? Well, there is a claim now that a lot of these single elements have not been studied well chronically. That is kind of true, atrazine, et cetera, but my beef has always been with the combinations. In medicine, you know, Josh, as well as I, every time you combine two drugs, you start with square one because the combination might be qualitatively or quantitatively more toxic or least toxic than either single component. So, once again, we have the combinations we deal with. If you don't believe me, look at the EPA. The EPA gave testimony in Maui during the initiative. They referenced the National Academy of Science. I leave you the reference list. I give you 17 references. The National Academy of Science, everybody's scientific guru, the largest section on pesticides is mixtures. How do we deal with that? The uncertainty of toxicity. How do we even evaluate these? And the EPA says, well, we haven't really started evaluating any combination. And the National Academy of Science says, I think you should define first what is a combination. A combination is sprayed in a tank together, sprayed separately, but overlap in the environment. Maybe the chemicals never see each other in the tank or the environment, but the pathology, the damage, continues on until it repairs while the other damage continues on. So the definition of combination by the National Academy of Science is quite extensive. So what? Why are you concerned about the combinations? How will this help with this bill? Well, I went ahead and calculated all the potential combinations depending how many single elements, chemicals you use. Remember, maybe we studied the single ones well, maybe we didn't, but let's just give it to them. They studied the single ones well. Let's say it. When you use 4 chemicals, there are, I'll leave this for you, 15 combinations, okay? Now, you've studied each single one, so there's 11 that you didn't study. Okay, that's 4. Who uses 4? Maybe the guy spraying the weed killer along the road. Okay. When there are 15, who uses 15? Maybe the pineapple and sugarcane guys. There are 30,000 combinations, mixtures that you really didn't study any of the mixtures, did you? And each one, like you and I know, is potentially as dangerous as a single one. When you use 30, well, who uses 30? Well, some guys do. There's 10 billion. When you use 45, who uses 45? Strawberries, apples, non-GMO, 10 trillion. And here is what we pulled from Kauai. They use 80-plus chemicals. The chemical companies in Hawaii, the seed companies, use a whole bunch more chemicals, amount and kinds. 80 is a trillion combinations. Now, they're not all dangerous. Some of them don't have an effect. So let's give it to them. Maybe only 1 out of a trillion is dangerous. But you had a trillion. Well, now you got a trillion left to deal with. But maybe that explains why guys use 30 chemicals, 10 billion, when only 1 out of a trillion is dangerous. Never saw a surprise. Maybe we don't have to worry about it. And this is what I wanted to address with the termite control guides, small farmers, the gymnasium school guys. It's the number of kinds that you use. And of course the amount, because it overlaps or doesn't. Now, if you want to cut the limit at that, not just how much you use, but how many kinds. Why? Because we haven't tested any combination except maybe 2 or 3. And this is supported by the National Academy of Science. What else could this contribute? I leave this for you, the number of combinations you really don't know what we're doing with. It sets your buffer zone. When you say, well, look, how far should we do it? Well, here is one of the chemicals, the most volatile. Are we adjusting the single chemical? Absolutely not. That represents the drift of all the 80 and all the other trillion combinations that could be. You have actually no scientific grounds to set a limit on the buffer zone without knowing the threshold effect, but you never knew the combinations. Next, the kids. You worry about the kids, the toxicity of the kids? Well, with a trillion, well, let's just take 1 trillionth of that. A trillion unknowns, I worry about myself. Sure, the kids are at higher risk. I'm going to be old someday, and in the true name of preventive medicine, why wait till I get old to say, hey, you're really messed up, you can't handle these things? It's cumulative. You should have prevented it before I get old, and I'm getting close. Now, that is the target group. I am trying to, and I've already addressed the users. I'm willing to give a break to the, well, not break, but I don't think we have scientific, strong arguments to go after the termite guys if you know the termite chemicals well. I don't think you have a strong argument to go after the roadside crew if you know those chemicals well. And it's controversial if you know glyphosate well or not. So these are my scientific arguments to maybe support the bill or temper it a little bit. Once again, I am not against the small farmers. I myself am against, I'm a small farmer, but I don't use 10 chemicals at once. I say above because I don't use more than one. My wife won't let me. And I am not going to be put out of business, and I agree with that. But this is the rationale. So I'll be happy. I'll stay around for questions, and I leave this with all the references for you. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Pang. We do appreciate it. Chelsea will take that and get it to us. Glad to see you become so mellow in your middle age.
Good afternoon. Dan Purcell, member for the public. On a bit lighter note, first I want to congratulate Scott Enright on his renomination to head the Department of Agriculture. But I want to direct you to page 16, line 9, where it says the public annual reports shall be posted online on the department's website, and I might recommend an amendment. You might suggest that they be posted within 48 hours, 72 hours, 10 days, or 30 days or something. And I'll tell you 3 quick reasons why the department is a bit challenged in posting things online. Under annual reports, the last annual report that was filed for them of any sort at all was in 2012. When we go to their website for Board of Agriculture actions, these are meetings, these are things that occur in their meeting where they take action. They're basically the minutes. Last minutes or any action we have from the Board of Agriculture were in 2012. And finally, they were posting financial and compliance audit reports from Acuity. The last one we have is from 2009. Also, none of their agenda submittals for any of their meetings are available online. So I would encourage you, Chair Enright claims it's for budget problems, but we really need to get this stuff posted quickly. Much mahalo. Thank you.
Thank you, Dan. That individual was from Big Island. If she can still be caught, I think we could get her testimony. Who else did I have wanting to testify on this measure?
Hello, my name is Wendell Kabutan. I'm from Waimea Valley, Kauai, right under the DuPont Pioneer Research Facility. And I'm part of the lawsuit. We have about 175 people in the lawsuit. And the list that we got from the federal court was 93 poisons, 37 RUPs, and the rest of them were general use pesticides and surfactants and stuff like that. And but my concern is illnesses. My wife got sick. She had breast cancer. My neighbor 2 doors down, she died. Her daughter-in-law was in chemotherapy with my wife. My neighbor across the street has leukemia. I've been coughing since February 2014. My neighbor has been coughing for 6 months, on and on. But I want somebody to come down Alawai Road and go to every home and see how many people died of cancer, how many people died of kidney disease, how many people died of diabetes, because we have both kidney disease and diabetes, which glyphosate eats up your kidneys and your pancreas and everything else, your microflora in your gut. But nobody will do the study. We started an anecdotal study. We have 125 people in the valley dead, survived. But that's a lot of people. and nobody will listen to us. We have dead birds, we have all kinds of dead fish and the shells from the 55,000 sea urchins, but we don't have money to test any of it. And it's just, my concern that just in the valley, because the 175 is Waimea Valley only, it doesn't include Kekaha because of the first phase of the lawsuit, which they're meeting this afternoon because there's a decision or something that came through. But anyway, I wanted, if it was at all possible, for somebody to send somebody to do an anecdotal study just on our street and see how many people actually dead, dying, or presently sick from pesticide-related or possible pesticide-related illnesses. And that's my main concern because too many people, 2 roads down the valley, incredible, 3 people in the same house dead. One of our friends just died last week. Her sister died of cancer, her mother died of cancer. It's on and on, it's not ending. And we're suffering every day. So last week my asthma and cough was really, really bad. I've been here for 1 week. It's improved. So that's what happened the last time I went to the mainland. 2 weeks and my breathing improved. As soon as I go back to Kauai, my first day back, I start coughing. So there's something in the environment around my home that's causing my asthma. So if you do the study, you see all the kids, my neighbor's kids. My neighbor went through emergency 3 times, he couldn't breathe. I went 2 times, I couldn't breathe. It's on and on. Somebody has to study this to prove that the clusters are vast. It's incredible how many people are sick. And it's not normal. You can go down Princeville Road, you're not gonna find anything like this at all. They have 1 guy down the road who died of cancer, not 125. Thank you.
Thank you, Wendell. Do we have anyone still from Department of Health here today? We'll ask Wendell. You're from Department of Health? Yeah. So if you could take Wendell's information and then convey it to Director, that would be helpful for longitudinal purposes. Okay? We're going to take a brief recess for a moment.